My name's Arthur and I thank you for joining me as we continue reading the book of Numbers. And today we turn to chapter 20, which is moving forward towards the end of the 40 years that the children of Israel would spend in the wilderness. The Lord has cared for them throughout that period of time, providing food and water, making sure that their clothes do not wear out and their shoes do not wear out. But gradually the generation that rebelled against him, that came out of Egypt and would not enter the promised land, has died off one by one. And so a new generation has arisen, who do not have a hankering after Egypt, but they're still complaining. Numbers chapter 20. Then the children of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month. And the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. Now there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and Aaron. And the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, If only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Why have you brought up the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we and our animals should die here? And why have you made us come out of Egypt, to bring us to this evil place? It is not a place of grain, or figs, or vines, or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink. So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord, as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock. And he said to them, Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, Because you did not believe me, to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. This was the water of Meribah, because the children of Israel contended with the Lord, and he was hallowed among them. Now Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Thus says your brother Israel, You know all the hardship that has befallen us, how our fathers went down to Egypt, and we dwelt in Egypt a long time, and the Egyptians afflicted us and our fathers. When we cried out to the Lord, he heard our voice and sent the angel and brought us up out of Egypt. Now here we are in Kadesh, a city on the edge of your border. Please, let us pass through your country. We will not pass through fields or vineyards, nor will we drink water from wells. We will go along the king's highway. We will not turn aside to the right hand or to the left, until we have passed through your territory. Then Edom said to him, You shall not pass through my land, lest I come out against you with the sword. So the children of Israel said to him, We will go by the highway, and if I or my livestock drink any of your water, then I will pay for it. Let me only pass through on foot, nothing more. Then he said, You shall not pass through. So Edom came out against them with many men and with a strong hand. Thus Edom refused to give Israel passage through his territory. So Israel turned away from him. Now the children of Israel, the whole congregation, journeyed from Kadesh and came to Mount Hor. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in Mount Hor by the border of the land of Edom, saying, Aaron shall be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land which I have given to the children of Israel, because you rebelled against my word at the water of Meribah. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son, and bring them up to Mount Hor, and strip Aaron of his garments, and put them on Eleazar his son. For Aaron shall be gathered to his people, and die there. So Moses did just as the Lord commanded, and they went up to Mount Hor in the sight of all the congregation. Moses stripped Aaron of his garments, and put them on Eleazar his son. And Aaron died there on the top of the mountain. Then Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain. Now when all the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, all the house of Israel mourned for Aaron 30 days. May the Lord bless these words to us. So it's time for the children of Israel to come into the land. When the children of Israel come to the wilderness of sin, they see no water. What were the children of Israel to do? Well, obviously they were not to complain against the Lord, but they were to trust the Lord. But again, as they had done in the years before, they say, if only we had died before the Lord. Why are we alive today to experience this dying of thirst? They just conclude that Moses and Aaron have failed to deliver for them. We are so impatient. God provides opportunity for us regularly to know his grace, and God's grace would meet their need. They didn't have to complain about it, but they did. And the fact that they complained led Moses to sin. Moses and Aaron were instructed to take the rod and go to the rock and speak to the rock. Now, many years before, the instruction was to strike the rock and God would provide water from the rock. But the rock was only to be struck once. And the New Testament tells us that the rock that followed them was the Lord Jesus Christ. He was only struck once. He doesn't have to die again for my sin. He died for the sins of the whole world. The credit that he accrued in his righteous life and holy death is sufficient for the sins of the whole world, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So now we just must speak words of confession and ask the Lord to come into our hearts. But Moses called out, "Hear, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock?" And he struck the rock a second time. Well, the water came out because God's provision was there. But the Lord was unhappy that they had struck the rock and had not just spoken to the rock, believing that the water would come. Moses and Aaron would fail to enter the land because they had not hallowed the Lord. You know, we know that there are some great men in the Scriptures, but even great men sometimes fall short. Solomon fell. David fell short. Here, Moses and Aaron fall short. Well, God is taking them forward, and the direct route is through Edom, which is south of the land of Israel. But their brethren Edom refuse. They have a knowledge of God because they're descendants of Abraham and Isaac, but they want to be friends with the Canaanites, and so they don't want to upset the Canaanites. They do not see that God will give the land to the Israelites. They refuse to let the Israelites come. They block their way. To block the way of God's people will ultimately bring judgment on themselves. And so Malachi records for us, Israel I have loved, Esau I have hated. The hating was because they turned away. They didn't walk in trust and faith. And so they wouldn't even let their brothers pass through the land. A similar kind of thing happened after the Second World War, when Jews were wanting to come back to the land. But Britain, who had opened the way for them earlier, now blocked their way and made it difficult for many people who wanted to come back to Israel to actually come back to the land, because they wanted to appease the Arab nations that were nearby. But the Lord has a way to bring his people home. And so we come to the death of Aaron. They go up the mountain. Moses removes Aaron's holy clothes and transfers them to Aaron's son Eleazar. So Aaron dies, and Eleazar will be the chief priest as the children of Israel enter the land.